Hey there, Crown Corner family. It's your host, Crown, back with another episode filled with stories that are sure to amaze, amuse, and maybe even inspire a bit of reflection. Whether you're sipping on a coffee or just taking a break from your day, you're in the right place for some truly unique tales. So grab your favorite snack, get comfy, and let's dive into the world of the unexpected twists, heartwarming moments, and the downright bizarre. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get this show on a road. As someone working in Thailand abstracting, my days are usually filled with poring over property documents, ensuring everything is in order for our clients. It's a job that requires attention to detail and a lot of patience, but nothing prepared me for the storm that was Karen. Karen was part of my business networking group, and over time, we developed a sort of camaraderie. So when she decided to buy a new house, she naturally came to my company for title insurance. The house she had her eyes on belonged to Bob, an elderly gentleman with a demeanor as calm as a summer lake. Everything seemed straightforward at first. Karen and Bob signed the purchase agreement, setting the closing date for the 28th of August, and Karen's current house was to close on the 21st. The issue was Karen had to move out of her current place on the 21st, but couldn't move into Bob's house until the 28th. We informed Karen about this a month and a half in advance. Her reaction was, let's say, less than composed. She couldn't fathom the idea of being homeless for a week. My coworker, trying to be helpful, suggested asking Bob to pre-sign on the 21st. This wouldn't change the move-in date, but it might offer some flexibility. Bob agreed to pre-sign, but was clear that Karen couldn't move in early. Fast forward the months, we remind Karen about the pre-signing, and she had either forgotten or ignored the details because the news hit her like a ton of bricks. The outburst that followed was volcanic. She called my boss, unleashing a tirade of accusations and expletives. We patiently explained that the contract dates were not within our control, but logic was lost on Karen. In her fury, Karen lashed out at everyone involved. She harassed her own agent, Bigglesworth, and Bob's agent Mary, an unassuming septuagenarian. She even went as far as to badger Bob directly, trying to bully him into letting her move in early. Karen's antics escalated to the point of threatening to cancel the transactions. We warned her about the legal repercussions, and she backed down. But then she proudly announced that she had convinced Bob to relent. I personally called Bob to confirm, only to hear him say something I'll never forget. It'll be a cold day in hell before I let that witch have her way. At 80, Bob was unyielding in his stance against Karen's entitlement. Karen spent the next week living in a friend's camper, playing the victim. Meanwhile, I started distancing myself from her. She didn't take kindly to this and confronted me about it. And that's when I decided it was time for some hard truths. I told Karen off. Maybe it wasn't the most professional moment of my career, but it was necessary. She needed to hear that the world didn't revolve around her. It was a moment of reckoning for Karen. A reminder that no amount of going through a lot excuses treating others like dirt. My wife Anna and I had spent years perfecting our little garden sanctuary, a patch of green we were proud of. But that morning was different. As I stepped outside, I noticed something off about our lawn. Patches of grass were wilting and turning brown. Confused, I called out to Anna, "Honey, did you see the lawn?" She joined me, her brows furrowing in concern. "This wasn't like this yesterday. What could have happened?" While we pondered, our neighbor casually strolled by. He was a weird man, always boasting about his flawless lawn and casting envious looks at ours. "Morning," he called out, a smug grin on his face. "Looks like your lawn's seen better days." His tone irked me, but I brushed it off. "Yeah, not sure what's going on." As days passed, our lawn's condition worsened. Anna and I tried everything from changing the watering schedule to using different fertilizers, but nothing worked. It was then we decided to install a security camera, suspecting something more sinister. A week later, we hit pay dirt. The footage from our camera revealed the shocking truth. Mr. Neighbor, under the cover of night, was deliberately spraying our lawn with some chemical. I felt enraged. "He's been poisoning our lawn?" Anna, equally furious, suggested, "We need to confront him. This is unacceptable." So we went over to his house. I knocked on the door, trying to keep my anger in check. He answered with his usual smug smile, which quickly faded when I confronted him with the evidence. "Is this your idea of neighborly conduct? Poisoning our lawn?" I demanded. He scoffed. "Your lawn was an eyesore. It needed to be dealt with." The audacity of his response left us speechless. He seemed to believe he had done nothing wrong. I warned him, "We're pressing charges. This is criminal." He laughed it off. "Good luck with that. No one will take your side over a few patches of grass." We contacted the police and filed a report, presented the video evidence, and the officers were surprisingly sympathetic and assured us that they would handle it. Within days, he was arrested for property damage and trespassing. The court date arrived and we presented our case. Mr. Neighbor, on the other hand, showed no remorse. He kept insisting that he was improving the neighborhood by getting rid of our ugly lawn. The judge, however, wasn't buying any of it. In the end, he was found guilty and was ordered to pay a hefty fine along with serving community service. First of all, the story is a bit older, but I will keep things rather ambiguous at times just for my own safety. I don't know how much my company can find out. So let's get started. I started working in logistics at a company that builds things. That was just as COVID was starting actually. When I started, there were 5 people in the team, but one of the guys quit soon after. This is important because it was a very good insight into how my department operates when they don't need or want a certain someone around. They will not outright fire you, since then they have to pay you severance, but instead they will bully you into quitting. I saw pretty much the whole package, excluding them from meetings and important events, putting them down in public, lecturing them, never noticing good work done, but always making sure everyone knows about work that is poorly done. Drowning someone in work and then berating them when they inevitably can't keep up. It was outright childish at times. I didn't register it at the time, but it was a really valuable lesson for later. I was put in charge of managing our overseas suppliers. Among other things, about half of our material came from overseas, most of that from China. While it seems like a big task for someone new, it wasn't done out of malice. Genuinely, everyone believed we were going to get a guy in China for the Chinese supplies, then not be left with a handful of others. It seemed fair. But we never got that guy for China, and I was left with all the overseas suppliers. Another important thing is that just in this project, the company had decided to change the workflow for overseas suppliers. This is because due to COVID, the price of shipping containers had exploded. To explain it as simply as possible, previously the suppliers were responsible for filling our containers and bringing them to the harbor. We were responsible for picking them up from the harbor and bringing them to us. However, due to demands and many other things, sometimes we just needed 2 or 3 pallets of parts where a dozen or more could fit inside a container. So we were shipping a lot of air. The new workflow would have the suppliers bring the parts to an external warehouse, one in the US, one in China. Then we would load them into containers to get the containers as full as possible, and then bring them to the harbor and into our plant. This way we needed to rent far fewer containers. This complicated things because it erased the direct contact from us to the suppliers. And there was no official method of how we were going to keep in contact with suppliers. Tell them how many parts we need, how to package them, if there were any changes requested and so on. During that time, I was left mostly alone to deal with it, and I set up a system with Excel. It was mostly manual, rather simple, but it worked well. It worked so well that one of the suits even chatted with me about it for a bit, since he wanted to make it a standard in future projects. And also, this is very important, I was the only person who actually knew all our overseas suppliers and their contracts. Some of you might be able to tell where the story is going already. So during that entire time, nobody had actually bothered to ask me to explain to them how my system worked and where I kept track of all the supplier contacts. Although this data was hidden on slide 800 of some Excel file I had saved in a folder titled Part Pictures, which was otherwise filled with pictures of parts. Now, moving forward, as COVID began dying down, the department, for whatever reason, decided they didn't need me anymore. I have theories, but nothing certain, so I will just leave it at that. I pretty much saw precisely the same thing go down as I had seen with that one guy who had left shortly after I started. All the bullying. I thought to myself at first that if I pulled through and kept doing a good job, and I believe I did a good job, they would eventually cool down. But they didn't. After 2 months of that, I said forget it, and decided to just sit out and endure until the Christmas bonus we get every year and then hand in my notice. And also, I just delayed teaching anyone how my system worked until I was gone. And that is pretty much how it happened. Off topic, for my own future employment, I actually lucked out. One of the local suppliers I was managing had a really chill guy as managing director. I gave him a call, explained I was about to be unemployed, and asked if they needed staff. He then called me in for an interview. We talked about anime for an hour while his HR lady looked confused about what Attack on Titan was. And he told me I could come in the moment I was done with my then current job. Back on topic. A month into working at my new job, I got a call from my old job. The department manager, to his credit, he was always a reasonable guy. He told me in plain words that they had no idea where to even start with the Chinese suppliers. He then offered me my old job back with a very respectable pay increase. I explained that I already had a new job. 2 days later, I got another call where the same manager offered me many times my monthly salary just to come in for 1 week and instruct my old team on how my process functioned, introduce them to all the contacts and so on. I told him I refused because of the way I had been treated by them when I worked there. He said that he understood and wished me luck in my new job and hung up. The reason I'm writing this story now, this week I randomly got in touch with some of the people in the transport department from my old job. They mentioned that in the now 10 months since I left, the logistics department racked up 8-figure losses due to wrong deliveries, over and under deliveries, outdated parts, some suppliers canceling their contracts, and new suppliers needing to be sourced and so on. And all the blame for that fell on my old team. My new job is fine. It's not the best job, but I get to travel a lot and get nice bonuses for it. My boss hasn't been around much since he got married, and I do sometimes regret not taking that offer for a week as an instructor. My wife quit teaching around 4 years ago for mental health issues. My wife has shown no real desire to get back into the workforce. It's not like we're struggling per se, but I would be lying if I said I didn't miss the extra income from when my wife was working. About a year into her leave, her sister became pregnant, which did take up a large portion of her free time. So over the last 2 years, my wife has been babysitting her niece for around 12 hours a day, 3 days out of the week. She is stressed, but does it because her sister claims she has no other option and cannot afford childcare. Even so, I don't think it's reasonable for my wife to do 12 hours a day for 3 days. So since my wife has not said anything for 2 years, I told my sister-in-law that come next year, she needs to go to daycare because I'm not going to let my wife do what amounts to slave labor. My sister-in-law told me it was not my place to say what my wife could and could not do. I get this point of view, and I will be lying if I said I'm not slightly miffed. My wife can work 36 hours a week, 3 days a week for free, but claims she is not ready to return to the workforce. This is a separate issue. The core issue here is my sister-in-law is taking advantage of my wife to provide free childcare. This is not okay. In the past, my wife did talk about pay, but my wife doesn't like to chase people for money. So since she never reminds them, they claim to always forget. Either way, I told my sister-in-law that this is where we stand. My wife is upset with me since she claims it's not my place to say what she can and cannot do. It's not my place to tell others how she's feeling. So, am I the jerk? For clarity's sake, I did talk this over with my wife many times. She's burnt out from watching her niece, but in her view, her sister has no other option. She has expressed how babysitting over these years combined with teaching has killed all the desire she once had for having children of her own. As mentioned, my wife has spoken about pay, but since she doesn't like to chase people for money, she never gets the money. She feels she should not have to remind people of money. They should want to pay someone to help them, especially when it comes to family. She also is afraid her sister will become unstable if she loses her family support. I stepped in because I was sick of her being taken advantage of. I did not just sidestep her, I have tried many times over these years to put her foot down. But she loves her niece and does not want to see her suffer. My point is she's destroying her mental health just like teaching. I was the one who encouraged her to quit because it was literally destroying her. All she did was wake up, go to work, come home and go to sleep. It was a struggle to get her to eat at times. The same is happening with babysitting for my wife. One last edit, since people said that I should mention it. My wife is not doing this alone. When I get some, I do take over the last 3 hours and I drop the kid off at her mother's when she gets off work. We also provide food and child supplies such as diapers and pull-ups. My wife is also potty training my niece. She's more or less raising her niece 3 days out of the week. And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, "You're not the jerk. Her sister is totally taking advantage of your wife and of you." After 2 years of watching, your wife continued to suffer with her mental health. She's not helping herself, so I don't blame you for stepping in to help her. I would add the caveat that your wife needs therapy. Another commenter goes with, "Everybody's a jerk, but your sister-in-law is the biggest jerk." It's pretty obvious why the sister-in-law is. She's obviously taking advantage of both of you and your wife. Both your time and money are tied up in this. She had a child she can't afford and will only send it to a top-of-the-line daycare. This isn't how it works. Where is the father? Why isn't child support covering at least some of the daycare? That is something she should be pursuing. She could also likely find a potentially less expensive in-home daycare where she could only pay for the 3 days she works. I know many regular businesses you have to pay for the spot rather than the days, but at home are sometimes more flexible. You, a little bit, because you really need to word your concerns better and be clearer with your wife about your concerns. It isn't slave labor, she's volunteering. Even if she says she doesn't want to, the point is that she is. I think you two are past sugarcoating stuff though. What you need to point out is that you're willing to support your wife because you love her and you agreed she could quit her job for her mental health. What you didn't agree to was financially supporting her while she raises a child that is not yours. And you definitely didn't agree to financially support a child that isn't yours, especially when it's affecting her mental health and thus your overall relationship. Your wife, because she absolutely needs to grow up here and stand up for herself. Either she's lying to you or she's lying to her sister. Either way, she needs to be clear what she needs and wants beyond what anyone else is saying. My guess is that this won't change unless you two sit down and discuss it at length, potentially with a therapist. Even then, she may not be able to say no. At that point, you will need to decide if you want to continue to financially support her and the child while she raises her sister's child 36 hours a week. I am somewhat curious though. You said she's now saying she doesn't want children of her own. Is that something you two discussed before marriage? This is kind of a big deal if you wanted children and now she doesn't. That is definitely something to nail down as soon as possible. No idea how old you two are. If you still want children, it is possible she isn't equipped to handle them. If 36 hours of a child is this difficult for her, I can't imagine 24/7 being any easier. Is that a deal breaker? A third commenter adds, "Ordinarily, I would say that you're the jerk for stepping over your wife. But it sounds like she's struggling to make boundaries and she may be so depressed she can't. I suggest getting her into therapy, she needs it, and have her doctor check her out for depression. And also encourage her to find ways to find joy and rejuvenation. Not the jerk." And that's it, my friends. Wraps up another episode here at K-Korner. From the wild world of property deals and neighborhood feuds to the complex dynamics of the workplace and family life, we've covered it all today. I hope these stories brought a smile, a thought, or even a conversation starter to your day. Remember, life's an adventure and everyone has a story to tell. If you loved what you heard, show us some love with a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep rocking. This is Crown, signing off.